I don't remember the moment my marriage started dying. There wasn't a dramatic explosion. No slammed doors. No screaming in the middle of the night. It was quieter than that. It felt like a slow leak. Something inside us was draining, and neither of us ever stopped long enough to check the puddle forming beneath our feet. My name is Karen. I've been married to Mark for 11 years. We met at a small tea house when I was 22 and he was 24, two stupid kids pretending we weren't terrified of the world yet. We built a life together. A house. A company. 2 children. Traditions. Vacations. Inside jokes. Most people reading this would probably think I had everything. Sometimes I thought so too. And yet, here I was, sitting at a cheap wooden bar stool in a nearly empty tumbleweed inn at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, rehearsing the words that were about to blow my life apart. I watched the condensation collect on the side of my glass, run down like a tear, and disappear into the napkin beneath it. I wondered if Mark would cry like that. I wondered if I would. Jason sat beside me. My lover. God, that word feels disgusting even typing it. He looked calm in that smug way only people who haven't yet realized the consequences of their decisions can look. Meanwhile, my stomach felt like a washing machine. Mark didn't know why he was meeting me here. He thought we were going to talk about us in private. That's what I told him. I left out the part where Jason would be here. I left out the part where Jason insisted we just tell him. I left out the part where I hadn't slept for 2 nights thinking about what I was doing. I heard the door open behind us and instantly felt pins prick the back of my neck. Not because I saw him, because I sensed him. It's strange how you develop that with someone. He walked toward us, and before he even reached me, I could feel the pain simmering under his skin, like a kettle about to whistle. "Hello, Mark," I said softly. Not honey. Not babe. Not even a hug. Just Mark. It sounded wrong coming out of my mouth. I hated how stiff it felt. He responded, matching my tone. "Hello, Mark." Then added pointedly, "What's up?" I could tell he was confused by Jason's presence. Anyone would be. That was my cue. But Jason spoke first. He always thinks he knows best. He introduced himself, shaking Mark's hand like this was some business transaction, not the reveal of a betrayal. And then he told my husband the truth, that we'd been sleeping together. For months. I watched Mark's face as it happened. Not rage. Not shock. Something worse. Silence. The kind of silence that swallows everything around it. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He didn't demand answers. He just stared. I tried to explain myself. I honestly don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe stupidity. Maybe desperation. "Mark, I didn't want to hurt you. I'm not leaving you. It's just, Jason is something special, and I can't walk away from that anymore." It sounded different in my head. More reasonable. Less horrifying. Mark didn't reply. He ordered a beer instead. He sat alone at the far end of the bar. Didn't look at me. Didn't look at Jason. He finished quietly, stood up without a word, and left. And in that moment, something terrifying happened. I realized he wasn't shocked. He suspected. He knew. And he was prepared. That's the thing about Mark. When he goes quiet, it's never good. Silence is where he does his most dangerous thinking. We sat there staring at the stool he had vacated, waiting for the world to swallow us. Jason grabbed my hand and said everything would work out fine. Like he understood my husband. He didn't. He had no idea. When I got home later that night, Mark was in an unusually good mood. He hugged the kids. Took them out for ice cream. I thought maybe he processed everything better than I expected. Or maybe he didn't care as much as I feared. Maybe the worst was already over. But then he came home alone. No kids. And that's when the dread hit me like a brick. He hardly talked to me that night. Went out again. Didn't return until nearly sunrise. I laid in bed wondering if he slept with someone else. That's when the jealousy hit me. A dark, ugly wave I did not expect. The irony is disgusting. My phone stayed silent all night. Jason didn't call. I kept staring at the screen, waiting for a message that never came. That's when the first crack hit me. Maybe I wasn't as important to him as he was to me. The next morning, I made bacon and eggs, trying to pretend everything was normal. Mark walked in like nothing was wrong, greeted me, complimented the breakfast. It was surreal, almost painful. He smiled at me like a stranger passing on the street. "I'll be here all day," I told him, thinking it was reassuring. He nodded politely, as if I was a server offering extra refills. Later, he left to drop the car off for break work. I called Jason. I shouldn't have. I knew that. But I needed reassurance.
Support. Redemption?
I don't know. When I told Jason that Mark seemed calm, he told me not to worry. He said calmness was a good sign. I realize now how stupid that was. Because calmness is never a good sign. Not with Mark. Calm means planning. Calm means calculating. Calm means consequences. That night, for the first time since our children were born, Mark did not ask where they were. He didn't check on them. He didn't wonder if they ate dinner. He didn't ask if they brushed their teeth. He didn't ask if they were okay. He didn't look at the empty bedrooms with sadness. He looked at them with acceptance. And that terrified me more than anything. I should have known then. I didn't. That Thursday morning, Mark barely looked at me during breakfast. We sat across from each other like two strangers accidentally assigned the same restaurant table.
He didn't accuse me.
He didn't bring up what happened at the bar. He didn't ask about Jason.
He just observed.
Watching. Listening. Measuring. It felt like being examined by a surgeon right before anesthesia. At one point, he wiped his mouth with a napkin, looked me in the eye, and said, "I have errands today. Be home later." No affection. No warmth. No annoyance. Just business. I told myself to relax. Maybe this was good. Maybe he just wanted clarity. Maybe honesty actually was the best policy. Jason seemed to think so. That afternoon, after the house got quiet, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the dirty mug Mark left behind. I lifted it and pressed my thumb to the lip imprint he left on the rim. My hands were shaking. The weight of what I had risked suddenly felt unbearable. But it was too late. I had made my choices. When Mark returned around dinner time, he was pleasant, which scared me more than anger would have. The kids were still at my sister-in-law's house, apparently for the whole weekend. Asked why, and he said simply, "I thought they'd enjoy time with Sue." He said it casually, like it was obvious. But something felt off.
Sue hadn't called me. She always called me.
Especially about the kids. But I told myself I was imagining things. Creating paranoia from guilt. Designing ghosts out of shadows. Mark sat across from me on the couch that night, watching TV, sipping tea.
Calm.
So calm. Eventually, he went upstairs without a word. I sat alone in the quiet living room for a long time. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt connected to him. To the man I married. I reached for my phone, opened Jason's messages, and stared at his last text. He'll get over it. Would he? Could he? Should he? I didn't answer. Instead, I deleted the message. I didn't want to stare at it anymore. Friday was strange. Mark seemed uplifted, purposeful, focused. He wore one of his nicer shirts for the first time in months.
He shaved.
He actually smiled. That terrified me more than anything. People don't look more alive when they're healing. They look more alive when they're preparing. In the early afternoon, when he headed out again, I noticed him take his briefcase. He never takes his briefcase on weekends. That evening he came back late, smelling faintly like bar drinks, though I couldn't tell which kind. He didn't seem drunk, just loosened, relaxed. He crawled into bed next to me without a word. The mattress barely dipped with his weight. I reached for his hand. He pulled away. No argument. No anger. Just quiet rejection. A wall. Invisible, but unbreakable. I don't remember when I fell asleep. Only that I woke up feeling like something irreversible had shifted. Saturday was surreal. He made breakfast again. He sat at the table scrolling his phone while I wandered around the kitchen pretending to tidy things that didn't need tidying. I asked if he wanted to do something together. He said, "I have plans later."
Plans.
Plans he wouldn't tell me about. At one point, he walked into the living room, opened the sliding door, and stepped outside without speaking. He was out there a while, long enough for me to start worrying, panicking. When he finally returned, he looked at me and said, casually, "Going out for a bit?" I nodded like a coward, like a child, like someone waiting for a verdict they knew they deserved. Jason texted twice that day. I didn't respond. It's strange how fast love and fear can switch places. One becomes quiet, the other deafening. By Sunday noon, Mark was gone again.
I didn't know where.
But I knew something was wrong. He hadn't called the kids. He always checked on them during weekends, especially Sundays. By the time he returned late that night, his energy was different. Harder. More resolved. He didn't avoid my eyes anymore. He didn't look lost or confused. He looked ready. And inside, I started cracking. I wanted to ask what he'd been doing, where he'd been, why he looked like someone who'd just made a deal with fate. But every word dried in my throat. He never once mentioned Jason. Or the bar.
Or me.
He simply said, "Big day tomorrow." I forced a smile. Pretended I understood. Pretended everything was fine. Pretended I still belonged in his life. When I woke up Monday morning, Mark was already gone. No note. No text. Just absence. And a strange, sinking stillness in the house. I remember straightening the bedsheet on an empty bed with trembling fingers. Feeling nauseous. Feeling like I was preparing for something terrible but inevitable. The house felt unnaturally quiet, like a theater moments before the curtain rises. When I got to work, everything felt normal for exactly 2 minutes. Then I saw Mark standing outside my boss's office. He wasn't talking. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't confronting anyone. He was just waiting. Watching.
Silent.
My stomach flipped so violently, I thought I was going to faint. I didn't have time to speak to him, because seconds later, a man in a dark jacket walked in holding a manila envelope. He asked my name. I said yes. He handed me the envelope and said 2 words that split the air open. "You're served." My knees buckled. The room blurred. My boss rushed forward, asking what happened, trying to comfort me. But I only looked at one person.
Mark.
Still standing there. Still silent. Still watching. He looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Not hatred. Not resentment. Not even anger. Just finality. Like all the love we ever had burned away, and this was the ash. And then, he turned and walked away. Without a word. Without hesitation. Like he was already gone. In that moment, I realized something devastating. He hadn't been processing everything. He hadn't been healing. He hadn't been calming down. He'd been planning, strategizing, preparing his exit, preparing my fall, preparing the consequences. While I was waiting, he was working. And I was clueless. When Mark walked away from me at the office that Monday morning, something inside me shattered in a way I didn't think was possible. It wasn't the shock of being served with divorce papers. It wasn't even the humiliation of collapsing into a chair while my coworkers stared with pity and confusion. It was the realization that Mark hadn't abandoned me in anger. He had abandoned me in disappointment. And that is somehow worse. My boss kept asking if I wanted to go home, telling me to take the rest of the week off, offering sympathetic little touches on my shoulder that made me feel like a dying animal. I mumbled something about needing a minute, went into the bathroom, locked the stall, and cried until my entire face hurt. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. Red eyes, smudged mascara, shaking hands, ruined marriage. And I whispered the question I had been trying not to think. What have I done? Not, why did this happen? Not, how did this happen? I knew the answer. Because I chose it. Because I thought I could have both worlds, without consequence. Because I thought I was smarter than the fallout. Because I thought Mark was weak. He wasn't. Not even close. I went home early. I kept hoping he'd be there so we could talk, maybe cry, maybe apologize, maybe salvage something. Anything. But he wasn't. The house was empty.
And silent.
And cold. So I waited. And waited. And waited. Hours passed. Sunset came and went. Still nothing. When he finally walked through the door, he didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look angry. Just tired. Very, very tired. I tried to speak first. "Mark, can we talk?" He shrugged out of his jacket. Calmly hung it up.
Didn't look at me.
"There's nothing left to talk about." His voice didn't crack. Mine did. "Can't we at least try therapy? Or take a break? Or figure out something that doesn't destroy everything?" He finally looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, his eyes weren't warm. They were ice. "You destroyed everything. I'm just cleaning up what's left." I felt physically winded, like the wind had been knocked out of my lungs. But he wasn't done. "Also," he added, almost casually, "you won't be coming back here." I blinked.
What?
"There's a restraining order for the house. You'll get your temporary apartment information from my lawyer." I sat down. My legs couldn't even hold me anymore. "You're kicking me out of my home?" He looked directly into my eyes. "No, Karen. You forfeited your home." The way he said my name,
Cold.
final.
Done.
That night was the worst night of my life. Not because Mark yelled. Not because we argued. But because we didn't. He was polite. He was civil. He was controlled. He spoke to me the same way someone speaks to a customer service rep. Neutral tone. Measured phrases. No emotional energy invested whatsoever. I begged him. God, I hate admitting that. I begged like my life depended on it. I told him I still loved him. I told him I could fix everything. But every word just bounced off him like empty air. Because his love for me died long before that moment. I just didn't notice the funeral. Over the next 48 hours, everything escalated faster than I could comprehend. Mark's lawyer delivered copies of everything they had collected. Texts, call logs, witness names, pictures, even audio recordings. I broke down when I listened to my own voice telling Jason that Mark didn't matter anymore. I didn't recognize the woman in that recording. I still don't. Jason tried calling when he found out about the divorce serving. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail saying it would all be okay, that we would survive this. But I knew he was lying, because I had seen the panic in his texts, and the silence afterward. Turns out, Mark wasn't just strategizing against me. He had given the evidence to Jason's wife, too. I only know this because she messaged me. "Thank you for helping me see what he really is." Except there was no gratitude in the message. There was venom, and heartbreak, and rage, and grief. I read it 3 times before deleting it. Suddenly, Jason wasn't texting me anymore. Suddenly, Jason wasn't answering my calls. Suddenly, Jason was gone.
Just like that.
I had destroyed my marriage, betrayed my children, humiliated myself, for someone who disappeared the moment consequences arrived. And then there were the kids. I didn't realize how much distance I had built between us in those months. They were mad at me.
Confused.
Hurt. They asked why Daddy cried when he dropped them off. They asked why I wasn't home. They asked why the house felt different. Mark didn't badmouth me. He didn't have to. Silence was enough. Silence told them everything. When I hugged them goodbye that night at Sue's, my daughter wouldn't let go. My son didn't want to look at me. Both responses shattered me equally. Later, Mark met me at a coffee shop. He sat across from me like a lawyer interviewing a client. No nostalgia. No softness. No recognition of the life we shared. He explained everything. The terms. The custody plan. The visitation schedule. The financial arrangements. He told me he was giving me some money to get started. But not a life. Not a home. Not a marriage. Not a husband. Only a landing pad. Temporary. Transitionary. Disposable. Like me. When I tried to tell him I was sorry, really sorry, he just nodded faintly and said, "Okay." Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Cold acknowledgement. He slid a manila folder toward me. "Before you sign anything, you should know something." Inside were pictures. Of Jason. With someone else. Another woman. Saturday night. The same night I had convinced myself he was thinking about me. Laughing. Holding another woman. Kissing her. loving her, while I deluded myself that I mattered. I stared at those photos for what felt like an hour. My cheeks burned, my chest tightened, my throat locked. I felt humiliated all over again, but for entirely new reasons. Mark stood. "Goodbye, Karen." He didn't wait for my answer. He didn't watch me cry. He didn't clean up the emotional mess he left behind. He didn't know me that. He walked out of the cafe. And out of my life. And I knew, really knew, that he would never come back. Now I'm here, in a tiny apartment I never imagined myself living in, surrounded by silence that feels louder than screaming, writing this because I don't know what else to do. I wish I could say I was the victim of something, but I wasn't. I made this choice. I caused this. And now I live with the aftermath. I lost my husband. I lost my marriage. I lost my family. I lost my self-respect. And for what? For attention? Validation? Excitement? I don't even know anymore. The part that haunts me the most is knowing that Mark didn't destroy my life. He just stopped protecting me from the destruction I allowed in. He simply stepped aside and let the consequences hit. I keep hearing him say those words. "You deserve better."
I didn't understand them then.
I do now. Because he deserved better, too. And I failed him.